Central banking, it can feel like this black box, right? Some kind of mysterious art. But really, when you pull back the curtain, it's all about making these incredibly high stakes choices. And those choices, they're based on totally different economic playbooks. So today, we're going to dive right into that core dilemma that every single central banker has to grapple with. In a world that's always changing, what's the best way to steer the economy? And you know who put it best? Former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan. He basically said that uncertainty isn't just, part of the monetary policy landscape. It is the defining characteristic of that landscape. I mean, think about that. This whole game isn't about having a perfect crystal ball. No way. It's about making the absolute best decisions you can when you have no idea what's just around the corner. It's all about managing that uncertainty. And really, nothing hammers home that idea of uncertainty quite like a full-blown crisis. So let's do a little time travel. Let's go back to the fall of 2008. I mean, the entire global financial system was right on the brink of collapse. It was just teetering. Policymakers, they were in all-out crisis mode, staring down the biggest challenge they'd seen since the Great Depression. And the hits just kept coming, fast and hard. First, Lehman Brothers, this absolute giant of an investment bank, goes under. It declares bankruptcy. Then, just 2 days later, the insurance titan AIG is on the ropes, needing a staggering $85 billion government bailout just to survive. Can you imagine the pressure on the Federal Reserve at that moment? It was just immense. So, this all brings us right back to that fundamental question, what we're calling the central banker's dilemma. When the economy gets slammed by these huge, totally unpredictable shocks, what should you do? What's the right move? What's the playbook? That question right there, that's the absolute core of what we're digging into. Okay, so to even begin to answer that, we've got to understand the two main strategies, the two competing playbooks, really, that central banks have in their toolkit. And these aren't just slightly different tactics. They represent two fundamentally different ways of thinking about how to manage an economy. So, on one hand, you've got the strategy of targeting the money supply. You can think of this as the quantity approach. It's all about controlling the sheer amount of money floating around in the economy. Then, on the other hand, you have the strategy of targeting interest rates. This is the price approach. It's about controlling the cost of borrowing money. Now, here's the kicker. A central bank can't do both at once. It's an either-or situation. If you pick one, you have to let the other one go wherever the market takes it. So the big question is, which playbook is better? Well, it turns out the answer is, it depends. It completely depends on the kind of shock that's hitting the economy. So let's break that down, okay? We'll look at two totally different kinds of threats. All right, threat number one. Let's imagine the economy gets hit by what's called a real economy shock. Now, we're not talking about Wall Street or financial markets here. This is about the stuff we all buy and sell every day, the goods and services sector. Maybe businesses suddenly get spooked and stop investing, or maybe consumers all decide to tighten their belts and cut back on spending. Whatever the cause, you've suddenly got a whole lot of instability in the market for stuff. Okay, so in that scenario, targeting the money supply is actually the better move. But why? Well, it's because it creates this kind of natural monetary dampener. Think about it. If the economy starts overheating and spending gets too hot, demand for money shoots up. With a fixed supply, what happens? Interest rates automatically rise and cool things off. And the reverse is true too. If spending slumps, rates naturally fall, which makes it cheaper to borrow and gets things moving again. The system basically helps stabilize itself. It's pretty cool. But what if the shock is coming from somewhere else entirely? Let's talk about threat number two, a financial system shock. No, this is different. This is when the instability is in the demand for money itself. Maybe some new financial product messes everything up. Or maybe there's just a straight-up panic in the credit markets. All of a sudden, the financial system's need for money is just all over the place. In this case, targeting interest rates is the hands-down winner, no contest. By coming out and promising to keep the interest rate stable, the central bank basically builds a firewall. It insulates the real economy, the part with jobs and production, from all the chaos happening in the financial markets. The bank will pump in or pull out as much money as it needs to hold that rate steady, and that provides this incredibly crucial anchor in the storm. Now, this whole choice we've been talking about, money supply versus interest rates, this isn't just some dusty academic debate. Oh no. It has literally defined the real-world history of U.S. monetary policy. So let's take a look at how the Fed has actually wrestled with this dilemma over the past several decades. So if you look back at the 1970s, the Fed was mostly targeting interest rates. But by 1979, inflation was just out of control, a total monster. So Chairman Paul Volcker makes his now famous pivot. He switches to targeting the money supply, too, and this is the phrase everyone uses, break the back of inflation. And it worked. But then, in the 80s, a wave of financial deregulation made the demand for money super unstable. A classic financial shock, right? So the Fed pivoted again, right back to interest rates. And that strategy pretty much stuck for decades, right up until 2008, when interest rates hit zero and they had to invent a whole new playbook of unconventional policies. All this pivoting back and forth, though, it raises a much bigger question. Instead of just constantly reacting to the latest crisis, could we build a better, more predictable system, a system based on clear rules? I mean, this has been a huge debate, and not just in the US, but all over the world. And this chart, wow, it illustrates one of the key arguments for having rules just perfectly. What you're seeing here is a really powerful connection. Countries that have more independent central banks, banks that are shielded from the day-to-day political drama, have, over time, had much lower average inflation. It really suggests that when you give a central bank a clear job to do and the independence to do it, you get better results. And a huge reason for that is this tricky little concept called the time inconsistency problem. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Think about it like a patent. Before someone invents something amazing, it makes total sense for the government to promise them a patent. That encourages innovation. But after the invention is already out there, it's super tempting for the government to go back on its word to prevent a monopoly. See the problem? A central bank faces the exact same dilemma. It can promise to keep inflation low. But once businesses and workers have locked in their wages, the bank is tempted to fire up some surprise inflation to juice the economy. A firm rule, a clear commitment, helps them resist that temptation. It solves the credibility problem. Now, in the US, this debate has been absolutely fierce. You had Alan Greenspan, who was really against rigid rules. He favored a more flexible, risk management kind of style. Then his successor, Ben Bernanke, he pushed for what's called a flexible long-run inflation target, mostly to make things more transparent. But then you have critics like Benjamin Friedman, who worry that if you focus only on an inflation number, you lose sight of the Fed's other job, caring about employment and economic growth. So as you can tell, even among the heavy hitters, there is no simple, easy agreement on the single best way to do this. And so that leaves us right here, with the challenge for today and for the future. As central banks all around the world try to figure out a graceful exit from the wild, extraordinary policies they've been using for the last decade plus, the fundamental questions are still hanging in the air. What did we actually learn from all this? And maybe more importantly, what should the playbook look like for the next crisis? Because there will be a next one. That's not just $1 million question, it's the billion, maybe $1 trillion question that's going to shape the future of our economy.